I found a note taped to my apartment door on a windy Tuesday. Share the one bedroom, get a discount if we coupled up. Not married, not verified, just coupled. It sounded ridiculous until I met the man who would make that bargain feel like destiny. This is the story of how a landlord's odd idea turned two cautious strangers into family, how kindness outlasted nerves, and how a quiet hallway became the place where my life finally said yes to me. Before we start, please like, subscribe, comment, and share. Your support helps stories like this reach hearts and homes everywhere. The building where I lived had the kind of personality that made you lower your voice without meaning to. Red brick softened by ivy, creaking steps that remembered every foot, and a lobby that smelled like lemon oil and welcome. Most folks had been there long enough to know which radiator hissed like a cat and which mailbox stuck in the afternoon. We were a block from the park where the ducks did their patient parade, and 2 blocks from the bakery that knew your birthday because Mrs. Carmichael kept track and told them. It felt like somewhere you could put your coat down and trust it would still be there when you turned around. My name is Sam Walker. I run community programs at the library, which means I spend my days coaxing shy stories from people and watching faces light up when the right book lands in the right hands. I'm the sort of person who irons his shirts on Sundays because my mother's voice lives in the linen closet, reminding me that crisp collars won't change the world, but they can keep you steady enough to try. I know which neighbors need someone to carry their groceries and which ones pretend they don't. I make a meatloaf the way my grandmother taught me, with oats and onions and patience. The note that started everything was taped slightly crooked. Mr. Henderson, our landlord, isn't a man of perfect angles, but he's a man of good intentions. The paper fluttered whenever the hallway draft wandered through. Dear residents, it began in his tidy old-fashioned script. Times are tight. To keep our place full and our community steady, I'm offering a roommate discount for couples sharing a one-bedroom. Already coupled? You qualify. Willing to couple up and make a home together? You qualify. See me in the office. No circuses. The words were both silly and serious, like someone proposing a handshake deal with a little wink. Coupled up. It was not a legal term, not something the city clerk would stamp. But the city did like numbers that suggested stability. Couples, seniors, long-term tenants, it all whispered the word community to them. I could hear my neighbors reacting from behind their doors. Mr. Chang down the hall muttered something about young people and their arrangements. Someone laughed. Someone else said, well, if it keeps the rent civilized. I held my copy in the warm pocket between what I could afford and what I wanted to keep, which is to say, my life as I had arranged it with care. Rent had turned from a number into a personality. It hovered around my dinner plans and my shoe purchases. It scolded me gently when I stopped at the nicer grocery store. It clucked its tongue when I let the laundry wait until the cheap machines were taken. I could manage, but the note stood on my doorstep like a dare from a friendly giant. I went to see Mr. Henderson that afternoon. His office always looks a little like an antique shop that decided to stop pretending it was only about dusting. There's a shelf where maintenance requests compete with coupons, a jar full of pens that might remember their youth, and a framed photograph of a woman whose smile looked like sunlight breaking through weather. Margaret, he told me once, tapping the glass with a tenderness he couldn't hide. She kept me honest, and she kept the world kind. You saw the note, he said as soon as I stepped in, his glasses perched high on his forehead, like they'd climbed a hill and didn't know how to get down. Before you call it harebrained, I know. But I'm not interested in slapping posters up for strangers. I want my people to stay. If the city wants couples and seniors and folks who dig in, then I'll be the man who puts his arm around his building and says, here we are. I don't lie easily, I said. The truth being the most reliable thing about me. I don't have a boyfriend, and I won't pretend for paper. He folded his hands, then unfolded them, and nodded like a man who has been arguing with a stubborn doorknob his whole life and still understands the doorknob's point of view. I don't want anyone play-acting for me. I want respect. If 2 people agree to share a space and act like partners in the ways that matter, care, steadiness, decency, that's coupling in my book. I can show the city I've got neighbors, not tourists. Find someone who wants to build a home. The discount meets you halfway. You 2 do the rest. That's good enough for me. I carried his words back to my kitchen and set them on the table like a loaf of bread. I could taste both the practicality and the possibility under the crust. I wrote and deleted a dozen posts before I settled on words for the community board. 1 bedroom in a quiet, kind building. Landlord offers discount for couples. Looking for a roommate willing to be a good partner in all the important ways. Mutual respect, clear communication, and yes, we'll hold hands at potlucks if need be. I make grilled cheese with real butter. No parties. Plenty of books. The responses made me wish I could write a book about the ways people look for home. A man wanted to set up a drum kit in the pantry. Another asked if his 2 snakes counted as quiet pets. One person requested permission to practice competitive baton twirling in the hallway. I nearly said yes just to see it. And then there was an email from an Eli Morales. "Hi, Sam," it read. "I'm moving back to the city to work in arts outreach. I'm tidy. I recycle like it's a religion. And I make Spanish rice that wins the approval of most grandmothers. If we meet and it feels right, I'm open to the coupling arrangement. It sounds like a sitcom, but I like what you wrote about respect. Also, I own a plant that has survived my care, so I can be trusted. Coffee?" That line about his plant ruined me in the best way. I replied with the time and the name of the coffee shop that makes espresso like it's telling a story. I recognized him as soon as he pushed the door open. There's a way some people carry themselves that says they apologize to furniture when they bump into it. He had that softness. Dark curls that looked like they argued with combs, warm eyes that paid attention, and a laugh that popped out of him when I joked about the plant's survival like he'd been hoping for the chance to use it. We sat by the window. I told him about the building's quirks, the radiator that sings, the lobby that smells like lemon oil and a new start, the Christmas potluck where Mrs. Carmichael brings cookies in tins older than me. He told me about working at a museum where he helped get art into classrooms that hadn't seen a paintbrush in too long. He talked about his mother's Sunday cooking and his father's toolbox. He had been in a slow-fading relationship, he said, the kind where kindness turns into habit and then into polite silence. "We were good at not hurting each other," he said. "We forgot to be brave." "I'm steady," I said, like a confession and a promise. "Steady is underrated," he replied, and that's when I knew I wanted to hear him say ordinary words for a long time. We talked about the details. We agreed to be honest when something felt off. We agreed to protect each other's quiet. We agreed that we would be, for Mr. Henderson and the city and the community, a pair. Not a performance, a pact. "No stunts," Eli said, smiling. "No theatrics. If we hold hands, it's because we want to hold hands." We walked to my apartment for him to see it. The hallway gave us its usual greeting, a soft groan from the boards, afternoon light pooling like spilled milk. He ran a finger along a bookshelf I'd cobbled together with stubbornness and a level. "You made this?" he asked. And when I nodded, he grinned with real approval. My dad used to say measure twice, cut once, and then laugh because he'd always eyeball it anyway. The kitchen window let in light like kindness poured. He looked around, then back at me. "I'll take the smaller room," he decided. "You've made a home here. I'm stepping into it. I can claim my corner without taking your history." It felt like respect. He moved in 2 Saturdays later. The day smelled like cardboard and joy. Mr. Henderson propped open the front door and announced he would not be lifting so much as a lamp because the last time he helped a tenant, he'd lost a toenail to a casserole dish. "But I'll supervise," he said, a paper cup of coffee in hand, beaming like we were his grandsons. Settling in is a dance with tiny steps. Eli turned shampoo bottles so the labels face forward. I pretend not to notice and then turn them back. He puts cinnamon in his coffee. I stir too hard at first and learn better. He hums without words when he folds towels. I start to look forward to those soundless little songs. We share a grocery list on the fridge and write ridiculous notes in the margins. "Remember apples. Remember to breathe. Remember you promised not to buy any more fancy mustard, Sam." A few days after he moved in, Mr. Henderson introduced us to a new couple in the lobby. "This is Sam and Eli," he said, like he had been waiting to say those names in that order. "They're in love with our building, and that's good enough for me." Eli slipped his hand into mine the way people do in old movies when they step onto the dance floor and aren't sure who should lead. It wasn't a show. It was a small truth. The first building potluck we attended as we felt like stepping into a family photograph mid-smile. There were deviled eggs that came with apologies, fried chicken that came with advice, and an apple pie that came with instructions for happy marriages. I introduced Eli to Mrs. Carmichael, who looked him up and down and declared that he needed to eat more, the way she does to all of us with affection. "I have food at home," he protested. But he took the pie slice anyway and made the noise you make when butter and cinnamon become theology. We stood together, with our paper plates, and listened, while our neighbors told us which plumber to trust, and which nobody should ever let near their pipes. When we headed upstairs, Eli said, "It feels like a village here," and the pride I felt in that village made me taller. Our arrangement at first was a knit of practical kindness. Nothing more complicated than that. When he came home with his shoulders low because his program lost a donor, I made soup and set the bowl in front of him like a lit candle. He ate quietly, then reached for my hand on the table and said, "Thank you for being my quiet." When my car wouldn't start and I forgot how to be patient, he stood in the cold with me and made jokes until the tow truck arrived. He touched me on the back as we climbed the stairs, right where a person's weight meets another person's sense of safety, and the touch said, "You're not alone here." Winter put a white hat on the city. We learned how to share blankets and watch old movies without arguing about what counted as a classic. He nodded off during the shop around the corner, and I pretended not to notice because he looked content. We took turns shoveling, and he drew smiley faces in the snowbanks with the shovel blade like a boy who refused to let frost have the last word. The city inspector came in February. She wore a scarf that said she felt outnumbered by drafts and a face that said she felt outnumbered by loneliness in her job. She checked outlets and smoke alarms and asked bland questions about water pressure. We answered truthfully. When she looked up to thank us, she found us sitting close on the old couch with the throw blanket our building seems to own collectively. 100 hands have mended it. "You've got something special here," she said, not meaning romance specifically, but meaning connection, which is not far from the same thing. After she left, we laughed like children who'd successfully recited their lines in a school play. Eli made toast. I poured coffee. He rested his palm on my back without thinking. It felt like the world confirming what I hadn't said out loud yet. Spring loosened the city's shoulders. We started eating dinner on the little balcony, 2 chairs, and exactly enough space for our knees to bump. Eli brought home dried flowers from the museum gift shop and tucked them into a green vase I'd found at a yard sale, saying, "Not everything that lasts has to be alive." I wrote him notes on Post-its like reminders. "You did great today. There's leftover soup. Proud of you anyway and always." He slid a tea bag across the counter toward me on hard days, like a peace offering the world should have made first. On a warm Saturday, we went to the farmer's market together. We had finally admitted we were those people who bring a tote bag and an opinion about peaches. While Eli paid for tomatoes, something small slipped out of his pocket, hit the pavement with a polite clink, and disappeared under the edge of the table. He bent quickly, scooped it up, and tucked it back into his pocket with a face that tried to be casual. My heart became a committee meeting. I told myself it was a coin with sentimental value. I told myself it was a key. I told myself I wasn't allowed to tell myself anything else. We were off our rhythm the rest of the day. He noticed. Of course he did. "Did I do something?" he asked, careful as he buttered toast. Careful like a man moving a fragile vase. "I saw something fall from your pocket," I said, because if I couldn't tell him that, what were we building? I made up a story about it. I don't want to punish you for a story I wrote without inviting you to edit. He looked at me, then smiled. An expression that said, relief and affection had been sitting beside each other waiting their turn. He reached into his pocket and placed a small gold ring in my palm. It was simple, worn at the edges, lovely in the way an old song is lovely. "It was my grandmother's," he said. "I carry it when I'm nervous." When we were in front of the inspector, at big meetings. At the market today because I was about to ask the farmer if he had cilantro, and I always mess up asking for herbs for some reason. He laughed at himself, kind without being self-mocking. "It's a touchstone, something I hold when I'm trying to be brave." The story I had told myself folded itself up and apologized for the mess it made. "I'm sorry," I said. "I should have asked sooner." "Asking is welcome here," he said. "Your fears are welcome here too. If they're on the table, we can eat around them. If they stay under it, we'll trip." We agreed to keep telling each other when we were afraid. That turned out to be the simplest and most extraordinary decision we made. A letter arrived in May, not from Mr. Henderson this time, but from the building's owners, who had owners of their own. Corporate language that tried to sound like it knew our names. They were considering a sale. There would be changes. Mr. Henderson taped a second sheet beneath it, handwritten, "Please come to a building meeting Friday at 6. Bring your chairs, your opinions, and whatever makes you brave." He added a smiley face because he is not above charm as a tactic. The lobby filled. People in their Sunday best and in their Saturday chores pajamas. Hands folded, arms crossed, faces worried but alert. Mr. Henderson stood in front with his keys hanging from his belt like a tiny wind chime. He told us what he knew. He told us there was a program for tenants to purchase buildings like ours together. He told us it would require money and grit and the kind of patience you use when you wait for dough to rise. He asked for a committee. He asked for prayer in whatever form we practiced it. Quiet pie, a good letter to a council member. I signed up. Eli signed up. We walked the halls, knocking on doors and asking questions about what people needed and what they could give. Time, dollars, cookies for bake sales, stories for city meetings. We learned things. Who was a retired accountant, who spoke fluent legalese, who could set up a website that even Mr. Chang would feel comfortable using. We learned the names of the potted plants in the windows and the names of the grandchildren in the photographs on the mantelpieces. Our building changed from a place where people lived into a place where people lived together. In the midst of neighborhood spreadsheets and city forms, Eli and I became simpler. We were less worried about whether we were doing it right and more interested in doing it gently. We fell into the habit of reading to each other. He chose letters artists wrote home about their work and their dinners. I chose passages from cookbooks that take food more seriously than most people take philosophy. We laughed at all the same spots. We leaned against each other in a way that didn't ask a question anymore. It started to feel like we had answered it. One humid evening, the kind where the air asks you to slow down, we sat on the balcony with our feet on the railing, a bowl of cherries between us. He was quiet. Not the kind of quiet that means you had a long day and need to refill. The kind of quiet that means you're standing at the edge of something and making sure you can step without falling. "I've been thinking," he said at last. "Me too," I said, and my voice was steadier than my heart. When we started, we were agreeing to a deal. We'd be each other's person for the purpose of staying. I've turned it around and around in my head. I'm not interested anymore in pretending we're more or less than we are to make a landlord or a city comfortable. I want what we are to be the point. "What are we?" I asked, not to test him but to bless whatever he said. "I'm in love with you, Sam," he said, like a person who has practiced saying something hard until it fits his mouth. "I love your lists and your irons and your pancakes and your kindness that doesn't announce itself. I love how you greet the elevator like it's an old friend, and how you talk to the mail like it's a character in our story. Relief is one name for it. Joy is another." "I'm in love with you," I said back. "I love your cinnamon coffee and your humming laundry and your courage. I love that you tilt pictures on the wall when they're crooked because you care about what other people have to look at. I love the way you say neighbors like it's a verb." We didn't kiss then. We sat there letting the words be enough to begin with. Even the cherries seemed satisfied. Telling Mr. Henderson felt like the right kind of silly. We found him in the lobby fussing with the ficus. He looked up and saw our faces and said, "Well now, either you've seen a ghost or you've brought me good news." "Good news," Eli answered. "We're together," I said, and heard the truth ring like a bell you can't unring. Mr. Henderson took off his glasses, cleaned them on his shirt, and put them back on even though I don't think they needed it. "My Margaret always said the hallways do their best matchmaking," he said, beaming. "I'll have to start feeding the ficus better. Work isn't done yet. You two keep showing up for each other. We were busier than ever with the building. We held rallies disguised as potlucks. We wrote speeches that were more like prayers. We sat at long tables with people in suits who had never been introduced to our casseroles. We told them what it meant to grow roots on a street where a neighbor watched your window plants when you left town. We asked them to believe that was worth preserving, not because it belongs in a brochure, but because it is the skeleton of a good city. After a long summer of worry, early autumn brought good news. We'd be given the first chance to purchase the building as a cooperative, with support from a housing nonprofit that liked the smell of our lemon oil and our kind. We cheered. Mr. Henderson cried and called us knuckleheads, which is his love language. That night, after a celebration where someone brought brownies so perfect we had to establish a sign-up sheet for borrowing the pan, Eli asked me to take the long way upstairs. We climbed slowly. He was fidgeting in a way I recognized. He glanced toward his pocket once, then again. My heart noticed. At our door there was a note. Not an official notice, not a corporate stamp. Just my name written in his careful, friendly handwriting. He had taped it dead center the way I never could. "Read it," he said, looking like he had slept with his eyes open for a week. I peeled it off and read it while the hallway hummed with the sounds of a building settling into evening. Sam. We started with a bargain. We have turned it into a life I treasure with both hands. I want to do this on purpose. I want to bring the groceries in with you when we are 80 and complain about the weight of the milk. I want to argue about mustard and makeup before bed. I want to be your person in every possible way we get to name. I looked up at him. He put his hand in his pocket and took out the ring. It was that simple circle of gold, a little worn, more beautiful because of it. He didn't kneel because the hallway is narrow and because we didn't need a stage. He took my left hand in his and smiled like the inside of a church. "Sam Walker," he said, "will you marry me?" It is a strange thing to feel your whole life change, while the light over the stairwell buzzes and someone's television murmurs through a door and the air smells like laundry soap. Ordinary things made sacred. "Yes," I said, and it felt like a bridge lowering. "Yes." The ring slid onto my finger with a little catching because the story needed a detail to remember it by. Then it settled like it had been waiting there. We kissed, careful and sure, and our neighbors, who have a sixth sense for joy, opened their doors and clapped. Mrs. Carmichael cried and said, "I knew it," which is another language for a blessing. Mr. Henderson wiped his eyes with his handkerchief and told us to be on time for dinner even if the whole world was spinning with delight. We had the smallest engagement party in the courtyard the next weekend. People brought too much food and not enough chairs in exactly the right proportions. Eli's mother made rice that reminded everyone of someone they loved. My mother insisted on lemonade, even though it wasn't strictly lemonade weather, and fussed over whether she'd put in enough sugar. We told our families all the small truths about each other that add up to a big picture. Eli's mother took my face in her hands and said, "Take care of my son." And I said yes, as if I were answering a question from an altar. The cooperative became official in a flurry of signatures and unexpected pride. We were suddenly responsible for hallway paint and boiler schedules and a line item for flowers on the lobby table because beauty is a bill that's worth paying. Mr. Henderson announced he would be stepping back into an advisor role. He handed us a ring of keys, the way men of his age pass on a blessing, and told us not to forget that buildings don't stay kind without work. We planned a wedding that felt like us, simple, thoughtful, more attention to the vows than the napkins. We asked Mrs. Carmichael to bake the cake. She said no twice because she said fear is part of every recipe, then showed up with a cake that tasted like relief. We strung lights across the courtyard. The neighbors put folding chairs in rows that weren't quite straight. It didn't matter. The day was perfect because nothing tried too hard to be. The morning of the wedding, I woke before the sun and watched Eli sleep. He sleeps with one arm flung over his head and a soft crease at the corner of his mouth like a small smile he forgot to finish. I made coffee, then stood at the window and looked out at a city that had decided to be gentle for once. I felt as lucky as a person can feel and still be able to put on his shoes. We walked down together. Our building looked like a church someone made out of kindness and string lights. Mr. Henderson sat in the front row with a tie he had tucked into his shirt to keep it clean because that is how he is. Our vows were short, honest, and exactly ours. I promised to tell him when I'm afraid. He promised to listen like it's his favorite hobby. I promised to make pancakes on Sundays and to move heaven and earth to get to him on hard days. He promised to keep our laundry folded and our laughter easy. We kissed, and all the clapping felt like a heartbeat. We danced on the grass. Somebody put on a song the teens in the building had recommended. It had a beat that made Mr. Chang smile against his will. We passed around slices of cake like communion. People told us stories about their own beginnings. We listened like students in a good class. A wedding doesn't fix everything. It promises you'll hold the wrench together. We learned this in the days after. A pipe decided to be dramatic. A grant application for the co-op needed rewriting. A neighbor needed someone to sit with her while she waited for a call from a doctor. We did those things side by side. Our rings clicked against each other on the steering wheel sometimes. A gentle reminder. We made new routines. On Monday nights, we wrote down one good thing from the day and put it in a jar. On Tuesday afternoons, I stopped by the museum to walk Eli home and listen to him tell volunteers they were making the city kinder. On Thursdays, we ate dinner at the counter like teenagers in a sitcom because the dining table was covered in committee papers. On Sundays, we let ourselves be lazy until noon and then made eggs the way my grandfather taught me. With patience and salt, you can feel between your fingers. The building continued to be its quirky, lovable self. Somebody started leaving umbrellas in a basket by the door for whoever forgot theirs. Someone else put a small plant on the lobby table and topped up the water without keeping records of their generosity. We celebrated birthdays with pound cakes and new babies with quilts. And when someone moved away, we packed their U-Haul like the last round of Tetris and hugged them until they promised to write. When I look back at the day I found that note on my door, I can see the path that paper set me on. It did not promise romance. It offered something simpler and maybe more daring. Partnership. This is what I tell people if they ask how it began. We decided to be good to each other. We set the table for two. We told the truth when it mattered and asked for help when it didn't. We showed up at meetings and held hands in the lobby and made our neighbors' problems, our problems in the best way. On a cold afternoon exactly 1 year after our wedding, Mr. Henderson invited everyone to the lobby for his retirement from not retiring. He introduced the new manager, a woman with a calm voice and a no-nonsense bun. He reminded us, pointing at us with his keys for emphasis, that places only stay kind on purpose. Love is good, he said, but maintenance is better. We laughed. He wasn't wrong. After the crowd thinned, Eli pressed a small box into my hand. Don't panic, he said, because he knows I assign homework to gifts. Inside was a simple brass key and a handwritten note. The key, he explained, was for the storage unit he had finally organized because he knew it kept me up at night. The note said, "We're good at making beginnings. Let's keep making them." We went upstairs, past photographs on the walls from potlucks and fundraisers, and that one time the power went out, and we ate dinner by candlelight on the stairs, while Mr. Chang told a story about his first job in the city. We opened our door and stepped into a home that still smelled like lemon oil and dinner, and the faint burnt toast that seems to follow us. Eli hung up his coat. I put the new key on our hook. He stood behind me and wrapped his arms around my waist. We stood like that a long time, listening to the building breathe. People think love is an event. I think it's a habit. We practice it every time we leave the porch light on, and every time we tell each other the truth kindly, and every time we carry someone else's groceries up the stairs. A discount got us started. A promise kept us going. Every day, we choose the same hallway, the same kitchen, the same person making coffee with cinnamon and humming over a basket of laundry. So if you find yourself staring at a crooked note taped to your door, if you find yourself asked to be brave in a way that feels practical and absurd at once, I hope you say yes. I hope you measure twice and cut once and trust that even if you mismeasure, the person beside you will help sand the edges. I hope you come home to the smell of lemon oil and a steady hand on your back and a voice that says, "We can do this." I hope your building teaches you to be kinder than you expected and braver than you feared. We never pretend for the city anymore. We don't need to. We have stories now. Like the time the inspector told us we looked like community, and we decided to become it on purpose. Like the night the teens strung lights in the courtyard simply because the sky was too perfect to waste. Like the morning my mother called and asked how Eli took his coffee because she was knitting him a scarf and wanted to get the color right. This is our life. It is small in all the best ways. It is large when it needs to be. It fits. And when I look down at my hand, at this ring that once lived in someone else's pocket, and now lives on me, I remember every turn that brought us here. Not a fairy tale exactly. Better. Something true we made from what we were given: paper, keys, rooms, a chance. And two men willing to begin again and again until beginning turned into forever.